All right, thank you for joining us today. I'll call the December 14th, 2023 meeting of the Police Advisory and Oversight Board to order. So let's begin with roll call of commission members.
Todd Spellerberg.
Lucretia King.
Joanna Johnson,
And Dave Hoganson.
and I believe Scott. Yeah,
Yes, ma'am. Scott Paul's online.
yep, okay. All right, the next item is to approve the agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
I motion to approve it.
Okay, can I get a second?
Second.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, motion carried. The next item is to approve the minutes of the November 9th, 2023 meeting. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
I motion to approve the minutes.
Second?
Second.
Okay, yes. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, aye. Opposed? No? Okay, motion carried. The next item is public comment, and those that wish to address the Police Advisory and Oversight Board must use the sign-in sheet. Speakers must state their name. You're limited to 3 minutes. Comments should not contain any profanity or personal attacks. Do we have anyone signed up for comments today?
Yes, we have one public speaker, or Sarah Altopeter.
Okay.
My name is Sarah Altopeter. This past June, I was the victim of 2 restraining order violations. One incident, my children and I were at the square. The offender showed up, who was a very dangerous man, Ortis Alderman, and I called 911. The police did not show up. I waited for 35 minutes, and then I got a phone call from the Fargo Police Department officer. As I was on the phone with that officer, I was receiving my own pictures that the offender was sending me. I reviewed the last meeting, and I would like to make public comment about what was stated by the Fargo Police Department. There have been issues with the communication system, and these emails from 2021 that I provided to the board prove it. I filed a complaint in 2021 because I did not receive justice because Cody Gase did not get a notification that the prosecutor's office did not receive the pictures and evidence with the police report. He did not receive the notification. Therefore, he did not send the evidence, and I did not receive justice for that tire slashing, even though Ortis admitted he did it. This June, when the restraining order violations happened, I had to call repeatedly and beg for assistance for the charges to be completed. The prosecution sent a request to and Alex Nelson did not receive it. When I contacted him and stated that the prosecutor's office wanted a search warrant and an interview, he said I already did an interview. Then I called a lieutenant, and they stated the prosecutor did not want the search warrant anymore. The prosecutor then emailed them and told Fargo Police Department they still wanted the search warrant, and Fargo Police Department finally completed it. I'm disappointed that we did not receive the protection from the Fargo Police Department that we deserve. I was scared for myself and my children, and I'm asking for the Fargo Police Department to take action to resolve the issues with the communication systems and faster processing of the restraining order violations and ensuring that all evidence is sent over to the prosecutor's office with the report the first time. I have emailed you guys an example of how restraining order violations could be categorized as in colors red, orange, yellow. Obviously, it would be up to your discretion on how to format a program to ensure that restraining order violations are taken serious and there is an immediate response. I do want to commend Officer Fiegelberg and his partner for their response yesterday. I was losing faith in the Fargo Police Department, and he gave me hope. We have many good officers, and I do not want to discredit them or the Fargo Police Department. I am grateful for the good officers that we do have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay. Next item on the agenda is department updates. Chief, do we have any updates today?
Good evening, everyone. A couple of updates relative to our CRITAC subject matter expert review of our policy. After going through a kind of circuitous process, I was notified this week that The original SME was now available, and after our discussion a few meetings ago about all of that, gave them to go ahead to start the project because otherwise they don't know that we would be making any headway. So that process will be starting, and then we'll go from there. So at least we know that we've got a subject matter expert assigned to that policy review for that July 2022 incident. As that progresses, I'll keep you informed. I don't know, they're not able to give me a time frame, but they are dealing with the same staffing issues and things of that nature that a lot of other organizations are. And there's been some transition in personnel, so I think that might be part of some of the delay. But at least this is, I think, good news in terms of getting it going, and we'll just go from there. And then any questions relative to that?
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. Is this the person that we discussed some months ago that we were
Yes.
uncomfortable with?
Yes.
And how do we feel about that now?
Well, I was never uncomfortable professionally. I think it was a question of how would everyone else feel about it, and that's what our discussion was. And the other part of the discussion was if we weren't able to get someone else, or it would take too long, which it's taken some time already. The other SMEs didn't respond to their requests. And we also have kind of a second track going with the critical incident review that I talked about last time, where they would review both incidents, also from a kind of an overview training perspective as well. I believe that we are still going to get that service in addition to the policy review, so I think we'll actually get a couple of different things to look at once they get their work done. So, I mean, I'm comfortable with the process, and especially since there aren't really any alternatives to getting it accomplished, and I think timeliness and all of that is important also.
So will this be two separate reviews, the critical incident review by the team and then a policy review by the single individual?
Right. The SME is going to be handling policy review, and then my understanding of the critical response team, that's the other unit within CRITAC that's looking at the incidents in totality, looking for training recommendations or just recommendations in general about each incident, not collectively but individually, because they won't look at incidents if there isn't more than one in a jurisdiction. So because we had 2 incidents, there's actually 3, but the other that happened in the county. They agreed to take that on. They haven't told me that they've changed their minds since the other SME came back, so I think that we're still going to get both services.
Thank you.
Sure. And then anything else on that topic? Okay.
No.
And I'll keep you updated, of course. And then just letting you know that our next training academy starts January 22nd. We're pretty excited about that. We're going to have I'll have more particular numbers next meeting, but that will include the ability to hire the 6 new officers that we got through the grant. So it'll be a large class. So we're looking forward to that. And that concludes my updates.
And is the grant you're talking about, the grant where they are getting paid? Is it-
Yeah, that's the hiring grant. And there is one other update, which involves me turning it over to Assistant City Attorney Ian McLean for an update on the MOU with Southeast, I believe.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a quick update on the co-responder program. As you might recall, that's when we would be embedding social workers with the PD to respond to mental health calls. This would be the first of its kind in North Dakota, so we want to make sure we get it right. So we've been talking with the PD and the city attorney's offices in places in Minnesota which does have a program, such as St. Paul, St. Cloud, and Duluth, seeing what works for them, what doesn't, and sort of taking the best from each one of those programs for our own. There are various issues we're working through with HIPAA, training, liability, and insurance, but we are working through trying to come up with some sort of joint program that could work for us. I think we'll have more of a substantive update in about 1 month's time, though. But we're working with those various cities to try to figure out what's working for them.
Okay,
Good news.
Yeah.
right. Any other questions before we go? All right, that takes us down to the presentation for today, the Professional Accountability Unit, the data with the complaints and use of force.
Thank you. So what I have for everyone here is 2023, so from the beginning of the year until December 5th is where I stopped compiling the data. Unfortunately, it's not a complete year, but we're pretty close. So at least it's a good starting point. So. Okay, some of this will be review, and I apologize, but I just want to make sure, hopefully we can answer some of these things, some differences and complaints, why they go different directions, why they may be handled in different ways by just giving a quick synopsis on these. So our formal complaint, as you can see, it's if something that we look at, decide it may need further action, maybe more serious or complex, repetitive, and always investigated by a member higher in rank. The other issue or the other definition of a formal complaint is any complaint that is filled out by a member outside of the department. So any citizen, anything like that is automatically generated as a formal complaint. An informal complaint is typically minor, first-time offenses, non-repetitive, results usually in training, policy review, or an oral reprimand. An example of that may be a supervisor sees an officer driving too fast on a code response, or fails to show up for a municipal city, court trial, is late for work, something like that. First time offense, we'll do an informal complaint, which results or comes from their supervisor. So any questions on those two definitions? I know you have all heard them before, but just a little familiarity.
We're good.
We're good. Definition.
Is there a record made of an informal complaint?
Yes, we keep track of all of them. And I'll show you those numbers here towards the end. So again, kind of what I just went over, internal filed by a member within the department, external filed by non-department member, always investigated as a formal. If it's informal, it's sent to a shift commander. So if you work in investigations, it would still go to the lieutenant that supervises you. In my division, it would either come to myself or the other lieutenant that works for the training to do that, and results in an oral reprimand or training and policy review. If formal, then my unit, PAU, the Professional Accountability Unit, will investigate, which is myself or a sergeant that also does what I do. Generally, they're accepted by our on-duty shift supervisor or commander in charge of the employee. Sometimes these can be resolved through review of body-worn camera or discussion. Oftentimes we have external or people that come in from the community that originally think that this is a complaint, but after explaining to them law, policy, procedure, those types of things, oftentimes these can be resolved this way. Sometimes that does not resolve the question they may have, and then it will continue through as a complaint, where we do not discourage people to not fill out a complaint or anything. If they feel that that is what they need to do, that is certainly what we will do. Once the complaint investigation is done, we send it to the chief, who reviews it. He will then bring it back. It will be reviewed by the executive staff, and then between the executive staff will make a recommendation to the chief, and then the chief will ultimately decide discipline. As you can see there, when we do get complaints that are internal, we decide based off of the criteria that we discussed in that first slide: repetitive, minor in nature, experience of the employee, different things, whether it's going to be formal or informal. And that's a collaborative effort with our executive staff that make that decision. again, kind of went over that. Being presented, we recommend forward to the chief final determination. If we make a determination with or without an economic sanction, they'll be afforded an opportunity to respond to the chief, the employee will, and any determination with an economic sanction is afforded a pre-disciplinary or a predetermination hearing. Basically, as a government employee, if the government takes your money, that's taking your property. Therefore, we have to allow or give them an opportunity to have at least one more chance to say why we shouldn't do that, why we should consider this, or maybe there's something that they feel we missed in the investigation, something else that we need to do, another step or anything like that. So that is their chance to do that. When it comes to discipline, as far as how the chief makes his decision as to what the discipline and what the executive staff recommend, there's 5 different areas. So the motivation, was the employee doing it intentionally? Were they motivated by a just or lawful reason, but they maybe went about it the wrong way? Or were they completely motivated by something that would not be a part of our vision, mission, or values? The degree of harm, certainly significant. One of the biggest concerns that we have on that degree of harm is, what does that employee's actions, how does that affect what our community thinks of us and looks at us? You know, we've all heard that example of one officer 1,000 miles away does something wrong, and unfortunately that can make all of us look poor. So we want to make sure that we don't do that. So if we have that degree of harm, that higher degree that erodes trust or looks as though we are not being transparent, we just consider that a very high degree of harm. Our experience, is this a 10-year, 15-year officer who absolutely should know better, or is this a 10-month officer and this was maybe the first time they've ever dealt with something like that? Very different. I mean, we have high expectations, but we certainly have higher expectations with the more experience and the more training and things that our officers have been through. Was the action intentional or unintentional? So was it the best decision with the information they had, or did they go, I don't want to say out of their way, or did they know that it was wrong and continued to do it anyway? Or did they make that conscious decision to do something that they knew was wrong? And finally, the past record, again, we go within the last 5 years. Similar incidents, showing a pattern. Do we have a deeper issue here, or was this a one-time incident where they may have made a mistake? So all of these things are considered when we make the discipline recommendation. Okay, so here's the data of our complaints. Excuse me. So these are our formal complaints, again, from January 1st through December 5th. You can see by the pie chart there that 52% of the formal complaints are external. But again, as I told you before, any complaint that comes from an external source is automatically formal, which shows why that number will be higher. Internal percent is 48, internal is 48%. The allegations are on the side of it. That certainly does not encompass every allegation that may come through the department. However, these are the most common. Work performance, obviously that goes over a lot of things. That can be anywhere from failing to do a report, failing to do evidence correctly, failing to write an inaccurate report, all those different things. Professionalism, that deals with courtesy, how we treat the people that we interact with, lawful authority, use of force, missed or late for court or duty. Unfortunately, we do find that one quite a bit. Response, pursuit, so that means, again, kind of like that example I gave before, driving too fast, maybe driving inappropriately, or engaging in a pursuit that we would not deem within policy or reasonable or necessary for the time. And then certain equipment violations, not keeping track of their equipment, maybe leaving something unlocked, those types of things.
I have a question quickly.
Yes.
On the allegations, you have numbers to the left. Is that the number of allegations according to what's underneath? Like, for instance, the work performance, would that be 15 allegations?
Correct. And again, work performance, that's all that are compiled into one.
Right,
If that, hopefully that answers your question.
right. There were 15 allegations in regard to work performance.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Which means the other ones like use of force and late for court, that's 4, would be a total of 4.
Correct.
Okay.
Looks like the number is roughly 35 to 40. Is that right?
As far as altogether,
Yes.
there are more. Those are just, I don't want to use popular, most common.
Copy.
I
Okay.
will have a total number for you, I believe, here within a slide or two.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I have a question.
Sure.
When we have citizens come into the meetings here, like the young woman that spoke tonight, and she had a complaint, would that fall in these categories also?
Yes, it would, because she is obviously outside of our department. So if she has a complaint, goes through the process, fills out our complaint form, contacts us, then yes, that will be considered a formal complaint.
And if there's, say, more than one issue per, like, he showed up, he wouldn't take a report, and then he, started cussing or something. I don't know.
Right.
Just saying, like, more than one thing, would that be represented on this graph you're showing me? Because I know sometimes there's more than one component to a complaint.
Yes. So when we do these, when we write them up and submit them to the chief, we will write it as allegation 1 could be discourtesy. So again, the use of foul language, whatever that they are alleging. The second one could be a work performance, failed to do their job or go through their duty, exceeding their lawful duty. So we break them down based off of the information we receive, look at our policy manual, and then try to associate those different allegations the best that we can to within our policy. So it's not just one and that covers everything. We will
Okay.
go through as many as we can.
Okay. And so that could represent, these numbers could represent like one complaint that maybe put one in 2 or 3 categories, maybe.
Certainly, yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So when I'm looking at this, let's just go to work performance because it's your biggest number. We got 15 there. Do you have a slide coming up that shows us how many of those 15 could have been the same person?
I don't have the names per se or anything like that. I guess I didn't break it down that way. I can show you how many of them were sustained, not sustained, unfounded. I do have that data.
Because I work in an industry where you might have some weird numbers, but it might be 1 or 2 individuals causing a ton of these numbers.
Right.
So you don't have any data like that.
I guess we have that because we know who the complaints are, which again goes back to our 5 factors that we figure or that we use to recommend discipline. So again, is this a pattern? So is this the 3rd time that we've had to deal with employee A in a poor work performance? That will certainly increase the amount of discipline they were likely to receive.
I get that. It's just if it's the same person doing the same thing or same person in 5 of these categories, kind of skews the data even worse against you, to be
It
honest.
certainly can, but we want to try to, I don't know the best way to explain this, but make it show as though we are giving everything. But you're right, 2 people, 3 people could make it look like we're doing a very poor job. That's not the case, but certainly the numbers could be skewed that way. But we want to make sure that we present everything. Okay, so of our complaints, and this is of our formal complaints, 72% of them are sustained, 9% of them are unfounded, 7% are not sustained, 6% exonerated. We have 4% that are pending, And pending basically means we are either in the process of conducting the investigation or we are waiting for court to be done or some other type of legal action that needs to be done. Closed or incomplete, those are very similar. A lot of times closed will be someone will come, will make an allegation, and then we'll go through. We can't get a hold of them. We have follow-up. We can't do anything, so we submit what we have. That time it's closed. That doesn't mean it can't be reopened. Incomplete is we have someone makes an allegation and we are unable to contact them anymore. We do not have the information to complete a thorough investigation. We do everything we can to not have those incompletes just because obviously that is not the look that we want, but if people don't want to talk to us, they certainly don't have to.
And could you maybe describe the difference, just so people understand the difference between unfounded, not sustained, and exonerated?
So sustained obviously means that we believe, or I guess in our case would be the chief believes that what the allegation is did occur. Unfounded basically means that there is no basis for any of the allegation. Not sustained, meaning that is not what happened. And exonerated, a lot of times we get exonerated with use of force or a legal authority issue. And what the person is alleging happened did happen, but was within policy and was within the law. Any questions on that?
No, thank you for explaining.
So these are the different disciplines that we've had throughout the year. The most common, most frequent is a written reprimand, which I would say if you want to compare that, the next thing after written reprimand is suspension. So this is the highest non-economic sanction an employee can receive. Second one is our training and policy review. Oral reprimand, suspension, and then that last one that you see there is a resignation, and then in parentheses I have in lieu of termination. We did recommend termination to an employee earlier this year. That employee did resign in lieu of being terminated. And then we had one suspension. Oftentimes when we do these, the chief is very particular when we don't just reprimand someone. Hey, do better. And then, we send them away. More often than not, it'll be a written reprimand with a training and policy review. So again, when we have that person that maybe has done this before, we can say you were reprimanded, you were trained and shown what needed to be done or how you could have handled that better, and you made another mistake again or a similar mistake. So it's not just usually it's not just a written reprimand or an oral reprimand. More often than not, there is training and policy involved in that.
Okay.
I've got a question.
Sir.
At the beginning of the presentation, you used the term economic sanction.
Yes.
Is that, in layperson terms, is that a fine?
So that would be a suspension. I apologize. I probably should have explained. A suspension or a termination, meaning that by suspending them or terminating them, we are essentially taking money from them.
Okay, gotcha.
That would have been a much better way to describe it. I apologize for that.
I got two.
Yeah, $50 for whatever.
Chief said he's going to fine me. I heard him. So
That could be a policy amendment.
Late hit, right? On your oral reprimand column, you have a 1 underneath the column. Is that just a?
that's just a page number that I was unable to get off of there. Yeah, there's more than one. It corresponds to the number on the left.
So going back to my previous slide, when I see that suspension and then the resignation, I'm assuming the individual was suspended and then decided to resign.
Nope, those are two different
Two
people.
separate people.
Yes. Yep, two different instances.
And how long is a typical suspension?
I don't know, Chief. What would we say? I'll let you speak on that one.
Well, don't know if there's a typical one because we look at all of the factors involved, and especially if it's repetitive behavior like you've been asking about. That is a big piece that we look at. We could come up with that data just to give you broad numbers of, repeat individuals who repeatedly have policy violations. But as we progress along, progressive discipline, you could make your way to suspension, or demotion is another economic sanction as well, in between termination. Or your conduct might have just been egregious enough based on all the factors that we went right to suspension. And a big factor when you look at the training and policy review is the youth of the department as well. And I think that Lieutenant Averly is going to touch on that, but that's an issue that has brought us kind of full circle to that, to pay a lot more attention in that area as well.
So again, those are our numbers of the external complaints. So 13 unfounded, 7 exonerated, 5 sustained, 5 not sustained, 3 that are pending, and 1 that was incomplete. So again, those aren't the formal, obviously those are all formal complaints, but those are just the external complaints. Our informal complaints, this is again kind of that non-repetitive first-time offense, newer officer type of situation. As I said before, one of our most common one is missed or late for court duty, equipment, crashes, evidence, some work performance, use of force in a pursuit. But the good thing about this is if you look up, we had, of all of our informal complaints, 1 was an improper use of force, 1 was a pursuit that was outside of policy. Of course, we would like to have 0, but 1 is still pretty good. And again, that's our breakdown of the informal discipline. As I said before, the majority of them are an oral reprimand. We did have 1 that was assigned to training and policy review, and then we have 1 that's incomplete just because we have not been able to finish it yet. The oral reprimand in an informal complaint is more like a training and policy review, and if you read them, you'll see an example: an officer missed court, was late for work. So their supervisor will say, okay, obviously you know you need to be here. This is why you need to be here and on time. Here's some recommendations. Here's some things that I have done in the past or that I have heard of others doing in the past that help you. So again, it's not just the, parental finger and get out of here and do better next time. So we have versus last year. Again, we've had much more formal complaints this year and informal complaints this year. The chief kind of alluded as to some of why that's happening, and I'll get into that. But just so we know, and keep in mind, which is not the best, but this is through December 5th. The 2022 data is calendar year. So our analysis of doing...
Real quick, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
On that last slide there, it just looks like there was a pretty big uptick in informal complaints.
Yes.
Is that because you have a lot of new officers, or what do you think?
And that's pretty much the next slide that I'm
Okay.
that I'm going to. I mean, I don't think I'm going to give you every answer, but I think we have a pretty. So our complaints are up. There's no doubt about that. Several factors. The average tenure for our officers has decreased significantly. We have, I don't know what the percentage is, but I mean, I could comfortably say over 50% of our patrol staff have less than 5 years on. And again, just because you've been here 5, 10, 12 years doesn't mean that you automatically become an expert, but you've dealt with a lot more things. You've been exposed to a lot more things. You have received a lot more training and experience. So that's probably the biggest factor. Second is our greater use of technology. monitor and evaluate. Obviously, we got the body-worn cameras within the last 1.5 to 2 years. We're a lot more critical. We see a lot more things. We obviously are doing a better job than we have many years ago of documenting these things and bringing them forward. And we have a high standard and high expectations. Some of our people are not used to that, or maybe this is the first time they've had experience in somewhere where they have a high expectation and where decisions you make affect everyone. So we make sure that they are aware of that and that they know what we expect from them. Questions on that?
No, you answered my
Not a
question.
question, but just maybe a general comment. It seems like, a higher number isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? Especially if you've got internal complaints that are something's being done about it. You're holding yourself to a standard, and a complaint is a opportunity for improvement, rather than it doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. Obviously, we don't want the numbers to be high, especially for an external complaint. That's something that should be addressed. But I also think that maybe just a 1-year comparison to this year comparison might not be the best way to represent that. I would recommend maybe a last 3 years, last 4 years to compare. Was 2022 a historically low complaint versus 2023 as an average year? Does that make sense?
It does, 100%, and I agree with what you said. Showing the higher amount of internal complaints again shows that we are, actively supervising, monitoring, and regulating our employees.
Thank you.
Okay, so that kind of does it for the complaint. Any questions about that? The next thing I'm going to go into is use of force.
You're good.
Okay. So use of force are different categories. Physical force, the use of the taser, the use of OC or pepper spray, projectile, which is a 40 millimeter launcher, use of a canine or firearms, just because you'll see those throughout. So again, to date, or to the 5th anyway, 90% of our uses of force are within policy, 7% are unfounded, 3% are outside of policy. And what unfounded means is we may have someone that is under arrest and that claims an officer broke my arm, broke my leg, did some type of issue, something like that, slammed my head into the concrete, many different things. So they are always taken for medical evaluation if we use force on someone, or if they claim that we used force on them. And if we have a medical professional and we have body-worn camera, other surveillance camera footage that shows none of that clearly happened, that is then unfounded. So that's how we come to an unfounded resolution for a use of force. Again, our different type of force to use. The physical force, oftentimes a lot of that is someone is resistive, someone is taken to the ground, they may obtain a scratch on their face, a scrape, a bruise, scrape on their finger. Any type of injury like that is considered a use of force and would be documented as physical force. The use of the taser, use of the canine, the 40 millimeter, and then one with the firearm. Questions on that? We continue to see, I don't think this will be surprising to hardly anyone, but 60% of our uses of force are the subject either has some type of mental health condition or some type of chemical impairment. And our race, subject gender, highest category, white male, black male, Native American male, obviously you can see it there, Hispanic male, white female, black female, Native American female, and Hispanic female. So our use of force analysis, again, we've responded to 90,189 calls for service. 5,888 of these calls have resulted in arrest, grand total of 152 uses of force. Just so we know, the way we count that. So as an example, myself and Sergeant Gamrat respond to a call. We arrest someone or force is used upon this subject. The way we will document it is that my use of force is considered 1, his use of force is considered 2. So that explains why that number may be like that. If there's 3 officers that arrest someone, all 3 of them are going to be saying a use of force, even though it was on one subject for one incident. And that's done, again, just to show that we are being forthcoming with the data. So the math on that equates to force being used on 0.16% of all calls for service, and use of force on 2.5% of the arrests. Again, 60% subject was either under the influence of alcohol or drugs or in some type of mental health crisis. And again, the use of our body-worn camera is documented before. As I stated before, it's a great asset. It's a great training asset, and it certainly helps us. I mean, it doesn't tell us everything, but it certainly tells us a lot as far as establishing our legitimacy and the legality of our use of force. And that's it. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Is there any way to get a map of the city of Fargo where you can show us the areas where the use of force is happening?
I would imagine that we could compile that data. I guess I certainly couldn't do it right now, but I would imagine that we could do that.
I would love to see where the use of force is happening, or if it's just general popcorn across the city, or if there are spots.
Mm-hmm.
Like high call spots or something?
Well, are we using a lot of use of force on Broadway? And if so, why? You know, obviously there's a lot of bars there, but you know what I'm saying is,
Right.
I would be very interested to see where the use of force is happening.
Of the 5,888 arrests, when someone's arrested, are they all? Is each person that's arrested handcuffed?
I can't tell you that every single person is. There may be some medical conditions or some other things that's not the best thing to do, but a majority of the time, yes.
Okay.
And I imagine the public can go to the Fargo Police website, and there's a button or a link to file a complaint, like, you know, somebody could find
Yes.
that easily. Okay.
Yes, the form is on our website. The phone number to my office is on the website. I've had people download them, send them in. You can come in and grab one and fill it out right there. I've had people that don't have access to internet, so I've actually mailed them one with a return envelope, and they've sent it back. So we will certainly accommodate any way that we can to have you do that. Mm-hmm. Some people will say, well, why do you make us come in or fill this out? Well, we want to try to establish to make sure we know who we're talking to and that we can verify their identity. I don't think that it's fair for any business to just take information, not verify who someone may be, and act upon it. Mm-hmm. So,
Like you look for legitimacy or whatever
certainly
of the complaint before.
Right. Because I mean, if Citizen A makes a complaint against Officer A, and we look and Officer A has never even dealt with them, and anything that we can ever find, well, that's not legitimate. Mm-hmm. So we want to make sure we can verify identity.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about an outside complaint, the process for how one would file a complaint? Is that done online, over the phone? Can they walk in? What's the ease or difficulty of it? Has the method of reporting something changed in the last few years, that kind of thing?
Again, like I said, you can fill it out online. We would prefer to have you come in certainly and fill it out because then you can speak with the supervisor. But some people don't want to do that, and that's fine. So they can download it. It's a fillable form. They can fill it out right there, send it, and it comes to me. Or they could come in, fill one out. I can email them one as well if they're having trouble downloading it, or I can drop one in the mail to them with a return envelope, and they can send it back. A lot of times we get we get a lot of externals that are online. Unfortunately, we have a hard time sometimes following up with them, but more often than not, people will at least come in and speak with us so we can see who they are and, actually verify that they are who they say they are. Mm-hmm. So we'll do whatever we can to help or aid in that, filing or filling out that document.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm thinking that you want, if a complaint comes forth, that you want it to be thoroughly understood, and yet not a daunting task for the citizen, right?
Certainly. I mean, we want to make sure that we get every piece of information from them, so we can understand. Oftentimes we're not even aware of the incident that they're talking about because myself and the sergeant, this is all we do. So they might say, well, yeah, there was something that, don't you remember at the old Broadway Saturday night? No, we don't. So please give us everything that you have so we can consider every allegation, every piece of information.
Do you have complaints that are initiated, but then for some reason they don't, I'm not trying to think of the word, fulfilled or there's a point where a formal complaint might be initiated by a citizen that is somehow stopped in its tracks, either because the citizen didn't understand, didn't follow through, didn't come in, whatever. Do you track those?
Yes, so those would be like the incomplete that we have because, like I said, we can't contact them, we can't get any more information, we still document it.
Okay.
And what we have will still go to the chief, but a lot of times if we don't have that follow-up or anything, there isn't a whole lot to go on.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
If I could just add into, just for reference and reminders, our policy manual is online as well. And our personnel complaint policy is online. It's got all this information in there that people could look at, the multitude of ways they could make a complaint, how the complaints are investigated, notifications, all of that. So that's a pretty long policy, but it's available for public consumption.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, any other business? Any other business, Scott, on your end?
No, ma'am. Thank you.
All right. Well, I guess hearing none, the meeting of the Fargo Police Advisory and Oversight Board will stand adjourned. Our next meeting is scheduled for January 11th at 5 p.m.